Canned spaghetti was once comfort in a can, a quick dinner, a warm memory, a taste from childhood. But today, the truth inside that may shock you. We're not just talking about extra salt or a little sugar. We're talking about whole brands that built their business on convenience while cutting corners on health and honesty. We're talking about recipes that changed cans packed with sodium that can wipe out a day's allowance in one meal, and labels that hide the reality behind friendly cartoons. In this video, we're naming names, 5 canned spaghetti brands you should avoid at all costs, and 2 that are actually safe enough to keep in your pantry. These aren't guesses. These are the numbers, straight off the labels, the ownership shakeups from this very year, and the watchdog warnings that slipped under the radar. So before you crack open that next can stop, let's find out what's really inside. Number 1, Campbell's Spaghettios Original. Stop right there. If you've got a can of Spaghettios in your pantry, think twice before you open it. That bright red label, that silly jingle, that childhood memory of comfort food in a bowl, it's not what you think anymore. What once felt harmless has become a quiet threat hidden behind the same smiling rings of pasta. For millions of Americans, Spaghettios are a tradition. Parents grew up with them. Grandparents stocked them for quick dinners when life was busy. The brand built itself on nostalgia, marketing itself as safe, simple, and kid-friendly. But in 2025, the truth printed on the side of the can tells a very different story. Take a look at the nutrition label today. A single can of Spaghettios Original contains over 1,000 milligrams of sodium. That's close to half of what many doctors recommend for an entire day wiped out in one small serving. And it's not just the salt. Campbell's own product page still lists high fructose corn syrup among the ingredients. That's not the wholesome bowl of pasta your mom warmed on the stove decades ago. That's processed sugar designed to hook your taste buds and keep you coming back. And this isn't just speculation. In June of this year, a consumer watchdog roundup ranked Spaghettios among the unhealthiest canned pastas on the market. They pointed directly to the high sodium and added sugars. Meanwhile, in April, the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service issued a health alert for Campbell's frozen soup bowls contaminated with wood fragments in the cilantro ingredient. To be clear, it wasn't Spaghettios, but it showed something that matters even at a legendary food company like Campbell's. Quality control can slip. And when it slips, families pay the price. Now here's where it cuts deep. Kids still eat this stuff. Parents buy it because it feels safe, because it feels familiar. It's a piece of their childhood they want to share. But that choice means children are swallowing a sodium bomb with every spoonful. It means blood pressure risks and dietary habits being shaped at an age when bodies are still developing. And it means the trust of generations is being cashed in for profit margins. Of course, Campbell's isn't struggling. In fact, in 2025, the company reported strong sales in its meals and beverages division. That includes Spaghettios. So while consumers are watching their wallets and grabbing what feels affordable and quick, Campbell's is thriving. Nostalgia sells, bright labels sell, but health doesn't make the cut. So the next time you reach for that, can remember this: the rings inside aren't the same ones you grew up with. They're loaded with salt, laced with added sugar, and built to serve shareholders more than families. Spaghettios may still sing the same jingle, but the tune has changed. And the taste of trust that's long gone from the can. Number 2, great value spaghetti, rings and meatballs. Picture yourself in the grocery aisle. The shelves are stacked high with cans, bright labels competing for attention. There, tucked among the name brands, sits Walmart's great value spaghetti rings with meatballs. The price is lower, the can looks familiar, and in a world where every dollar matters, the choice feels smart. Why pay more when this one seems almost the same? That is the hook of the store brand. It feels like common sense. It feels like beating the system. Millions of Americans trust great value for that very reason. It is the bargain label that built its reputation on reliability. Retirees on fixed incomes, young families trying to stretch paychecks, busy parents looking for shortcuts. The store brand feels like a safe haven, a different label, but the same comfort food. At least that is the promise. But here's the truth hiding in plain sight. The savings at the register do not always tell the full story. What looks like a deal can come with costs that appear years later. And those costs do not show up in cents or dollars. They show up in health. They show up in habits. They show up in the quiet erosion of trust in what we feed the people we love. Canned spaghetti rings are not just pasta in a can. They are a product engineered to mimic a childhood favorite while cutting every corner possible. Consumer watchdogs have pointed out that these bargain cans are often just as processed, just as salty, just as risky as the name brands, and sometimes even worse. And here's where it gets slippery. The serving sizes on those cans are written in a way that makes the numbers look smaller than they really are. Families who eat the whole can, as most do, are taking in far more than they realize. It is a trick of perception, one that makes the food look harmless when it is anything but. Think about the human angle. A grandparent counting every penny fills the cart with store brands to make the budget last the month. A parent juggling 2 jobs buys the cheaper can to save time and money. The intention is good. The choice feels responsible. But what if that smart choice is quietly laying down the tracks for long-term harm? What if the trade-off for saving a few cents today is a health bill no one sees coming tomorrow? This is not about demonizing Walmart or the people who buy their products. The reality is simple. Great value exists because Americans need affordable food. And in many ways, it delivers exactly that. But affordability does not erase the hidden costs. When food is designed to meet a price point first and a standard of care second, the customer ends up paying one way or another. Maybe not at the register, maybe not this week, but eventually the bill comes due. So the next time you see that can on the shelf, ask yourself, what am I really buying? Am I buying dinner for tonight, or am I buying risks for tomorrow? The label says savings, but the truth is colder. What you are really buying is risk sold in bulk, stacked high, and passed off as a bargain. Number 3. Chef Boyardee Spaghetti and Meatballs. There was a time when a can of Chef Boyardee was more than just dinner. It was a small miracle for busy families, a hot meal that could be ready in minutes. The smiling little chef on the label promised comfort. Parents could stretch the grocery budget, kids could feel full, and the family table could be saved on nights when time was short. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable, and it was ours. That is the beautiful picture many of us still carry. A brand born in the 1920s from an Italian immigrant named Hector Boyardee, who simply wanted to share his recipes with neighbors. His food was about care, tradition, and the warmth of family. Over the years, Chef Boyardee became a household name. Millions of American kitchens kept a can on the shelf. It was never meant to be luxury, it was meant to be good, honest food you could count on. But the story did not end there. As the brand grew, it was passed from hand to hand. Family recipes became corporate property. By the time it landed in the portfolio of food, giant Conagra Chef Boyardee was no longer just a meal, it was a business unit, a line on a balance sheet. And in May of 2025, Conagra sold it off again, this time to Hometown Foods, backed by private equity investors. $600 million changed hands. A brand built on family tradition became another financial asset to be traded. Here's where the harsh reality sets in. Big companies do not simply sell food, they sell efficiency, they sell scale, they sell image. Once upon a time, quality was the first priority, but when corporations grow large enough, the goals multiply. They have to answer to shareholders. They have to cut costs to stay competitive. They have to push for profit in a crowded market. And when the focus shifts, ethics get stretched thin. Quality becomes one goal among many, not the guiding light it once was. We have seen the cracks before. In 2017, Chef Boyardee was part of a massive recall over 700,000 pounds of pasta pulled from shelves because allergens were left off the label. In 2019, they were forced into another recall, this time for mislabeling. Families bought chicken and rice bowls that were really beef ravioli. In 2023, a lawsuit accused the brand of misleading claims about preservatives. These are not the stories of one perfect company. They are reminders that even the biggest names can stumble. And here's the truth. Everyone understands it is hard to be perfect. No company is flawless. Mistakes happen in any business just as they do in life. But when it comes to the food we feed our families, we cannot afford to shrug it off. We cannot allow ourselves to be the victims of someone else's mistake. So the next time you pick up that can with this smiling little chef, remember the story it carries. It began with heart. It grew with pride. But it now moves through boardrooms, through contracts, through investors who may never open a can themselves. That is not the same warmth Hector Boyardee once promised. And while the taste may still feel familiar, the trust has been changed forever. Number 4. H-E-B Hill Country Fare Pasta Rings and Meatballs. In Texas, H-E-B is more than just a grocery store. For many families, it's a hometown institution. The store workers know your name, the shelves are stocked with local pride, and the brand itself carries the weight of trust. In towns big and small, H-E-B isn't just a place to shop, it's part of the community. That's why their house label, Hill Country Fare, feels safe. It looks like a neighbor's handshake. A promise that this is food for us made with the same care the company shows in its stores. So when a family in San Antonio or Houston grabs a can of Hill Country Fare pasta rings with meatballs, they don't think twice. They believe the name. They believe the reputation. They believe it must be good enough. But that trust is exactly where the danger hides. Because behind the friendly hometown name, the can is not made by neighbors in a local kitchen. It is mass-produced, cut to cost, designed to hit a price point. The same shortcuts that plague national brands show up here: too heavy processing additives, and the kind of salty punch that keeps a can shelf stable for months on end. What feels like local food is really factory food wearing a familiar label. That matters because H-E-B holds a special place in Texas life. People trust the store's bakery, its meat counter, its produce. They know the tortillas are fresh and the brisket is real. That level of care builds a relationship. So when the store brand carries the same name, people assume it carries the same quality. But the can on the shelf does not live up to the reputation of the store. And that mismatch can leave families paying a price they never expected. Think of a grandmother walking the aisles with her grandchild in tow. She chooses Hill Country Fare because she wants to save money and support her local grocer at the same time. The child smiles at the thought of spaghetti for dinner. But what goes into that bowl is no better than the national cans we've already warned about. It's the same processed meal, the same long-term health risks, the same gamble dressed up as local pride. And here's the heartbreaking truth: H-E-B does so much right. Its employees show up in disasters. Its stores feed communities when storms hit. Its name carries weight far beyond groceries, which makes it all the more painful when one of its own labels fails to live up to that standard. Nobody expects perfection, but everybody deserves honesty. And a hometown brand should never trade on trust while giving its people the same processed deal they'd get anywhere else. That's the paradox of Hill Country Fare. A label born in Texas pride, stamped with local trust, but filled with the same cold calculations as any other can. It doesn't just sit on the shelf, it sits heavy on the community that believed in it. Number 5. Aldi Raviolios. Walk into an Aldi, and you feel like you're beating the system. The carts cost a quarter, the shelves are no frills, the checkout is quick. It's a store built on the idea that smart shoppers know how to stretch a dollar, and for millions of Americans, that promise has delivered. That's why a can of Raviolios feels like a victory. Here's the same idea as the national brand's pasta and a red sauce, a quick meal in a pinch, but at a price that makes you smile at the checkout. It looks clever, it looks savvy, it looks like the kind of shortcut your grandparents would applaud. But here's the irony: the thing that feels like a win may be no win at all. Because inside that can is the same factory-made formula, the same processed base, the same shortcuts you'd expect from any budget brand. Only this time it carries the Aldi name, a name millions have come to trust as the smarter choice. And that's where the betrayal lands hardest. Taste tests and shopper reviews have called Raviolios watery, thin, and bland, with pasta that turns mushy, and meatballs that feel more like filler than food. Some families say it smells off, others say it leaves an aftertaste. It's the kind of disappointment that makes you realize the bargain came with a hidden cost. But it's not just about taste. It's about expectation. Aldi built its reputation on giving customers quality where they least expect it. Their produce section can shine. Their dairy aisle has real deals. Their organic line has made believers out of skeptics. So when a shopper trusts Raviolios, they believe they're getting that same Aldi promise in a can. The reality is much colder. What they're really getting is the same old canned pasta dressed in cheaper packaging. Think about the families making this choice. A father trying to feed kids after a long shift thinking he's doing right by saving a few dollars. A grandmother trying to stretch her grocery budget thinking she's making a responsible choice. These aren't careless people, they're careful people. And that's what makes the letdown sharper. The loyalty was there, the trust was there, and the product didn't meet them halfway. To be fair, Aldi has earned its place in American kitchens. Its system works, its bargains are real. That's why people let their guard down in the first place. But not every aisle delivers. And when it comes to Raviolios, the gap between promise and reality is hard to ignore. So the next time you see that familiar, can remember the irony. What looks like the clever move can be the very thing that betrays you. Raviolios wears the mask of a smart shopper's secret. But pull that mask off, and it's just another can cut by the same knife as all the rest. Sometimes the cheapest choice ends up costing the most. Transition. We've walked through 5 cans that should never sit on your shelf. 5 brands that carry more baggage than dinner should ever bring. Each one told the same story in its own way. Shortcuts, corporate deals, hometown labels that let us down. And the thread tying them all together. A quiet risk that grows heavier the longer we ignore it. But here's the good news. Not every can deserves the same warning. A few have managed to rise above the noise to build recipes that hold on to some honesty. They're not perfect, no food in a can ever is, but they are safer, cleaner, and closer to what we all thought canned pasta should have been in the first place. Two names stand out, two brands that offer a real alternative without the same long shadow. Let's start with the first. Number 6. Annie's Organic Boyardee. There's something quietly hopeful in a can called Annie's. It suggests a return to goodness, to cleaner ingredients, to food made with intention. People listen to that name because it promises something different. And in the world of canned pasta, where shortcuts are the norm, that promise matters. Annie's was founded in 1989 as a small organic brand born from garden roots, with a mission to bring better food to the table. Over the decades it grew, but without losing its origin story. It earned certifications USDA organic for many of its products, non-GMO verification, sometimes even transparent sourcing for ingredients. People remember seeing Annie's boxes and trusting that organic on the label meant something real. When General Mills acquired Annie's in 2018, many feared it would lose that soul. But in many ways, it has kept much of its identity. Annie's still leans into its goodness branding. Its Bernie O's canned pasta promises a simpler list of ingredients, no synthetic colors, and uses recognizable names in the ingredient deck. It may not be perfect, but compared to the other cans we've exposed, it carries a lighter shadow. Critics and consumers give it credit in comparison tests. In taste trials, while Annie's doesn't always win for flavor or sauce thickness, it often ranks ahead of budget and heavily processed competitors in perceived cleaner taste. Reviewers note that the sauce feels fresher, the pasta texture feels more natural, and there's less of that heavy canned aftertaste. These are subtle differences. Yet when you stack a can of Annie's next to a can of mass-market spaghetti, the contrast is noticeable. But here's the tension: canned pasta by nature is processed. Annie's can't escape that fact entirely. Even so, it chooses not to lean into sugar or artificial dyes to mask things. It doesn't pretend to be the same as jarred marinara with fresh noodles. Instead, it leans into its limitations and tries to balance them responsibly. What Annie's shows us is a path of possibility. It's a name that started small, built trust with a niche of consumers who demanded better, and was large enough now to be acquired, but has managed to retain parts of its original mission. In a market full of compromises, Annie's is not perfect, but it is the kind of compromise many of us can live with more comfortably. And from a cultural angle, there's a shift happening. More families now demand transparency, cleaner labels, less suspicion hidden in fine print. Annie's became a kind of bridge. It allowed people who grew up on canned pasta to stay in that world without becoming zealots for raw ingredients. It offers a familiar comfort with fewer regrets. That doesn't make Annie's immune. It might still carry sodium cost pressures, may eventually force corners, and in years ahead it could drift. But for today, it stands out. In the aisle full of shadows and sacrifice, Annie's brings a little light. In the next and final segment, we'll visit the last safe-leaning brand, 365 by Whole Foods, a choice that leans into ethics and scrutiny. But Annie's will always remain a benchmark, what canned pasta can become when a brand doesn't give up entirely on its ideals. Number 7. 365 by Whole Foods Market Organic Pasta Rings. When people walk into a Whole Foods, they expect more than groceries. They expect a system that filters out what doesn't belong. Clean aisles, careful sourcing, clear labels. The store sells not just food, but the feeling that someone has already done the worrying for you. That is where the 365 brand comes in. It's the store's backbone, the name stamped across everything from pasta to peanut butter. For canned pasta, that means organic rings and tomato sauce, a simple product, but one that carries the weight of the Whole Foods promise. What makes 365 different is not glamour or nostalgia. It is the way the system behind it works. Whole Foods enforces ingredient standards that ban artificial colors, flavors, and preservatives. Every product under its roof has to meet that bar. Customers don't have to scan labels line by line because the store itself acts as a filter. For older shoppers, especially, that consistency matters. It feels like a safety net woven into the act of shopping. Critics of Whole Foods often point to the price. Yes, it costs more than a bargain can, but what you are buying is not just noodles and sauce. You are buying into a structure where quality control is policy, not an afterthought. The service is not just at the register, it's in the rules the company sets long before the food hits the shelf. The 365 pasta rings reflect that approach. No cartoon mascots, no loud marketing, no illusions. Just a plain can carrying the quiet message, "We've checked this for you." It's a small gesture, but it adds up. For families who want the speed of canned pasta without the baggage. It is one of the rare options that feels aligned with the values of the store it represents. That doesn't make it flawless. At the end of the day, it's still canned pasta. It still carries salt. It still sits in a pantry for months. It still belongs to the world of processed food. But within those limits, Whole Foods has done something that feels rare in this aisle. They've created a product that doesn't try to trick the shopper. It exists quietly without noise because the system behind it speaks louder than the marketing ever could. Think of the service this way. At some stores, you are left alone with decisions squinting at fine print, unsure of what to trust. At Whole Foods, the guardrails are already in place. The 365 label is less about the pasta itself and more about the structure it represents, a structure designed to protect the shopper before the choice is even made. And that's what sets it apart. Not the taste, not the packaging, the system. A brand rooted in oversight and filters in a chain of service that turns the simple act of buying a can into something you can carry home with fewer doubts. In a world of cans filled with shortcuts, the 365 pasta rings don't shout. They don't sparkle. They simply stand there as proof that service can extend beyond the store into the food itself. We've covered a lot together. From childhood favorites that lost their way to bargain cans that carried hidden costs, to the few brands that still offer a measure of honesty. It isn't always easy to face these truths. Food is personal. It's tied to memories, to family, to comfort. But the fact that you've stayed with me through this journey says something powerful. It says you care about what goes into your kitchen, and you care about the people you feed. So thank you. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your trust. Every viewer who asks questions, who looks twice at the label, who chooses a little more carefully, is part of the change. We may not be able to control every decision corporations make, but we can control what we buy, what we share, and what we pass down. The truth is simple. Every small choice adds up. A can left on the shelf, a recipe swapped for a cleaner one, a conversation started around the table. These are the steps that keep traditions alive without the baggage. Together, we can keep the comfort and leave the harm behind. And that is something worth believing in.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.